now, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. I actually I have notes on it.
Have a couple more stragglers coming.
Modica.
It's also going to be one of your presenters. For us, it's a special day because we get to come and learn a whole lot about things, and we really appreciate the three of these doctors taking their time from their families and their own personal lives, because this is about the only time they get their personal lives. Never a whole day, I'm sure, but pretty much they don't. They give up their morning for us. I always want to make sure we have a big crowd here. And we're also on the YouTube and on Facebook this morning, and we've sent that out to a few people and everybody else that wants to get it. We had four people last night signed in after 4:30 and said, "Oh, I forgot." Well, they're typical Lions. We always are the last minute to sign up for everything. So we appreciate everybody here and everybody at home who's watching this, and we hope you have a great day. But at this point, Dr. Zarbin is going to be here. Introduce. Thanks.
First, I want to thank you all for being here and also for your support over the years, many, many years. We really appreciate it. The way I've proposed that we do the morning is that I'm going to introduce first Dr. Turbin. He's going to talk about his experience in Grenada. Then Dr. Jascherdi, who's a very experienced cornea surgeon on our full-time faculty, is going to be speaking to us about the cornea and related conditions. And then I will talk a little bit about photoreceptor transplantation, which is a potential treatment for certain types of blindness. And then at the very end, give you an update on the department. So that's a little bit out of sequence. Normally I do the department update first, but out of respect for the time that these faculty members are contributing, I want them to be able to go home and be with their families as much as they can. So let me first introduce Dr. Turbin. Dr. Turbin is an oculoplastics and orbital surgeon. I think it's not an exaggeration to say that we have the most experienced orbital and oculoplastics team in the state of New Jersey, and certainly one of the most experienced in the United States. In addition to that, Dr. Turbin has training as a neuro-ophthalmologist, which is a type of ophthalmologist that specializes in diseases that affect the optic nerve and the radiations of the optic nerve into the brain. And there are very few of those, believe it or not, in the United States, and we have two in our department. And after you've worked here for about 20 years, you become a very, very, very experienced clinician. So these are really important skills that they have. that are available to basically everyone in the state of New Jersey. Anyway, I'm looking forward to hearing Dr. Turbin's talk about Grenada. He's promised that it's PG-13, so nobody has to worry about if their kids are watching this YouTube video.
It might be a little bit higher than that. This is not so much about a journey necessarily to Grenada, but it is about a life's journey and um, and further journeys. And I hope to keep this interesting. I really appreciate the what's that? Okay. All right. And I really appreciate the opportunity for this. So we're going to be ultimately winding up through a journey at a pilot program to address an unmet need for ocular prosthetics, people who have a bad eye and need a shell in Grenada, West Indies. My travel was supported by the SGU Humanitarian Network, which was begun by Orazio Gilberti, and the SGU Medical School. And here we go. And this obviously is not my poem, but hopefully you'll recognize it. Call me Ishmael. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse and nothing particularly to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world. It's a way I have of driving off the spleen and regulating the circulation. Whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it's a deep and drizzly November in my soul, and whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet, and especially when my hippus gets such an upper hand of me that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodically knocking people's hats off. Then I account it's high time to get to sea as soon as I can. And this is my substitute for the pistol and ball. And with a philosophical flourish, Cato throws himself upon his sword. I quietly took to the ship. There's nothing surprising in this, and if they but knew, almost all men, in their degree, sometime or other, cherish very nearly the same feelings toward the ocean with me. So let us journey, you and I, into a little bit of the watery part of the world. This is a vessel that I was shipped out to Spain in December of 2012. I was sitting in the American Academy of Ophthalmology when a shipmate, Dean Maggio, a very famous captain, called me and asked me to help him on a delivery of a boat from the Meteor, this vessel, from Port of Spain to Grenada, and hence the beginning of my love affair with Grenada. I want to point out to the size of this vessel. Those two men were there when I arrived, standing on a boom. That boom is about 3 tons. It's a 50-meter tall mast. Probably the rigging of that is, I don't know, 4 or 5 tons driven by wind. That's going to become important. I thought I'd have some time to see Spain. We arrived and we shipped out, and there are quite a number of things to see. This is a transatlantic crossing. This is a big deal. We're completely self-contained. I was hired to be the physician on board as a professional member of the crew, 13 other crew members, and I was supposed to be training the crew in medical care because the owner of the boat, this is the second boat, this is a smaller boat here that the group controlled, and it was unhealthy. And I was supposed to be providing the crew professional training so that when something happens, they'd be able to take care of this man. And all was good. Here I am, happy. The second gentleman here is the second captain, and I owe much of my life to him. Beautiful boat, 2 working fireplaces on board, and this is down below. I wrote a number of papers from on board on this long trip, getting used to ship life on board, beautiful boat. And I'm a fisherman, and this gentleman is a person who called me back by radio during what became a crash jibe that we're going to talk about a little bit. And Vegemite. It actually exists, and we had a broad view, and so I learned about Vegemite. And here we are in the Canary Islands, and this is December 9th. So I wanted to point out the gentleman on the right is Dean Maggio. I could talk for hours about him, and that boom that Aline is sitting on. You can see it's quite prominent. If one looks at, let's see, then these lines, they're about 3/4 inch lines, and on December 13th of 2012, we had to make a certain amount of headway, and we weren't making that. It was all hands on deck. Um, I was up on deck. I was the crew at that time. We put on more sail, and we performed a crash. We performed a jibe. A jibe is bringing the stern across the wind when the boom comes over quick. We got hit by a wave. We were about 1,250 miles off the northwest coast of Africa, and doing a crossing from Spain to Grenada. I'll show you a little bit about that. The line, because the line got thrown on the deck, basically, the boat got knocked over, and Aline had called me back, and I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The line wrapped my thigh. It lifted me upside down. I was hanging from the boom. Imagine a 3 or 4 ton piece of equipment blowing out with the wind and catching the line. If I did not have my copious size, anyone on board, their leg would have been gone. This was a few minutes after the injury. That was hours or a day into it. My quadriceps were cut off. My hemoglobin was about 5 when I got home. It was 15 when I came out. I lost sensation on half of my body. I lost sight. I was a mess. And it became what I had been teaching the crew. The crew was then practicing on me to keep me alive. And I basically died out there, but I'm here. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I was able to ski. So my leg isn't particularly good. That's what it looked like after they were done. I came here, the surgeons here fixed me up. So, but I was able to ski that season, not very well. I still can't run, but again, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So on the way out, the crew and the captain were looking for a place for the boat to reside for Christmas that year. We were supposed to wind up in Grenada. I called the medical school. I said, we don't have any room to stay. Can we? Will you support us? They said, if you give us some lectures to the medical students, I'll put up the crew in VIP housing. Perfect, bingo. The next time, though, that was basically on the trip out on a marine satellite telephone. On the way back, it was now, I have a critical injury. Can the medical school support me for care? And Raz was out there, Razio Gilberti and Dr. Siri was out there. They said, don't come here. We can't support you. We don't have this level of care. And so we were on our own. So we were taking about a middle blue course. We came out of the Mediterranean, came through the Straits of Gibraltar. We came down to the Canaries, and we came up and across. And so if I was injured somewhere around here, we would either have had to turn back across the trade winds or keep going. It came in exercise in survival. But hence the beginning of my love affair with Grenada. So let's now move to a little bit about Grenada. So there are 3 islands. It's Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. They're sister islands of the Caribbean island system with about 125,000 inhabitants over about 135 square miles. This is the same place that we invaded under Reagan in 1983. The real gross domestic product is about $1 billion in 2022. It dropped almost 14% in COVID. St. George's Medical School out there, the university, was responsible over as an average of 22% of the gross domestic product over the last 3 years. Somewhere around a fifth to a third of the folks there live in poverty. The dollar does very well out there. I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful place. The minimum wage is about $9, which is equivalent to $3.50 in the US. The average monthly salary is about $1,025 US. The medical care on the island, which is where we're going with this, is two-tiered. If you have private insurance, you can get private clinical care. I highly don't recommend it there. Most people expatriate if they can get a visa and come and get care in Europe, China, or the US. Therefore, there's a clinic system that it's run, but there's not a particularly national healthcare system. The folks in the clinic system pay for their own tests and their own medicines, albeit the visits are free. And then there's the quote private system. There are 3 government-run hospitals, and I work in St. George's General. We're going to go through that. There's Princess Alice Hospital. There's Mount Gay Psychiatric Hospital, and there's another hospital on Carriacou, and then 4 private hospitals, which I've actually never seen driving around the island. This is a typical home for some of the inhabitants in the upper right, and then if you look, that's in a market, and it says for customers only. Those are the benches for customers. So we were here just to give you an idea. We came from, it's off the map, and you've got the island chain, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and we're talking down in here, and I see Grenada. I think, yeah, okay. Just to give an idea of where we are. So this is the hospital in Carriacou. We took a trip out, and the radiologist in Grenada flies back and forth. He's a native of Carriacou. He flies his own plane, and a neurosurgeon I met there says, "Oh, you've got to see how Linwall does this. There's a cow on the edge of the runway, and when the cow's tail is up in the wind, he knows which way to take the plane." And I'm serious about that. I want to try and get a picture of that. And so, a multi-bed ward, it's interesting. The island is absolutely beautiful. Spice Island, their output is cinnamon, chocolates, beautiful place. I highly recommend it. And so, after I was injured, we were able to establish a program we're going to talk about. And we, the folks from our department who have come out, I'm trying to honor them with pictures. And I began small with myself as a surgeon and a tech, and then a secondary tech split between myself and Dr. Amir Cohen. And then we ultimately brought in residents. With COVID, everything dropped, and I just restarted it this year. It becomes very important to find your folks on the ground, and I found my folks on the ground, and I spent some time fishing, enjoying my time out there, and that becomes relevant. So our catch, they take nice care at night, and St. George's at their there's a club that we stay. So we're I would say it's a 3-star club in terms of accommodations, but 5-star where we're staying and with the food, which is incredible. So I began the humanitarian mission out there. And this is really, it's self-funded, except for the funding from the medical school providing basically room and board. In 2016, it was myself, a surgical tech, and Barbara, the clinical tech. We began with 21 patients per day, see patients over 2 days post-op, and did 12 surgeries. And we've basically peaked at about 70 unique patients, seeing them again another 20 to 30, so probably 90 to 100 patients over a week. And I've been able to bring it up to about 17 surgeries. That's myself. I'm actually a little bit more efficient when I'm there without a resident, but that's a different story. So we've gone from 2016 to 2024, hoping to bring it to twice a year at times. And I've been out once to set up a CME where I brought a neurosurgeon out there. They don't have scanners at the hospital, and it's really quite amazing. So the hospital is at the top of these hills, and any transportation has to go on these little rock roads from the top of the hospital down to basically the harbor where there's private scans. So if you're having a stroke or something, don't have a stroke there. If you're having a stroke there, you got to get into a little car and travel down. And so they got a CAT scan, a very high level CAT scan donation, and it took years. We went out there to set up a stroke program. It took, because basically one of the politicians or policemen had a stroke and they couldn't take care of him, and he did very poorly. So I went out there with Charlie Prestigiacomo, who is a neurosurgical chairman here, and we tried to set something up. And it's in a variable level of disarray now, as most things are out there. And they basically are having trouble keeping the environmental controls, cool and humidity, strong enough or appropriate enough to keep the scanner running. So it's not running now. So this is imagine having a very sick patient coming up and down this road. So my team out there, this is a young lady who is really in charge. It's an interesting system. I met her in 2016 when she was a house officer. She's basically an indentured servant there. She's not a doctor. She takes care of the public people. But she had such incredible skills that they sent her to Cuba. And there's this relationship with Cuba. So she went there. She disappeared for a while and is back, and that is now an ophthalmologist on the island. It's one of my persons that I communicate with during the year to keep things running. And this is Barbara Papsiak. She's a VA tech, and she's wonderful, and we can do anything out there together. And we've been advancing what we can do. So this is the university club. It's really quite nice, quite beautiful. And so our trips typically start from out of Newark or JFK. This is in the morning. And one of the big, and these are Tara and Cynthia Hinton, our surgical and my clinical tech. One of the big things that we have trouble with is equipment and gear and controlling things, and then in controlling the inventory. We're actually allowed to use currently stuff that's on the border of what you wouldn't use here as it's expiring, but you can use it there, if it's safe. And we've worked things out, but you never know what's going on with your stuff in the travel until you actually get into the hospital. And that means we usually don't have trouble here in customs, but when you're there, if you have a person who is ignorant, you may not get through customs. And now I've been out on the island so much, I've taken care of the customs officers, I've taken care of the police officers, and so we all know how the world works. And so now I have less trouble. But the next team that came had stuff shipped out. They had corneas and things like that put away in storage and couldn't get to it, and the stuff was all going to go bad. And so you never know really what's going to happen. My lovely wife went with the first time, and here we are getting off the trip. And we like to work hard, but and that means all night, all day. But we play very hard, and I make sure we stop at First Bites. This is the bar outside the airport, right? The first thing you see, and I make sure we all have a beer. And so we're very well taken care of, and that's Dan Rubenstein. He's one of the residents who went out. My team with Barbara, they do a nice job out there. But really, the surgical management and the instrumentation and things like that becomes a problem. I will emphasize some of that, but we work hard and we play hard. I wanted to point out the team on the right, and this gentleman is the undertaker on the island, one of the two. So half the island ultimately meets him, if you know what I mean. And he's an incredible guy. His last name is Bailey. So his fishing boat that we're fishing on is the Irish Cream. Bailey's Irish Cream. And so this, he's great. He's a resource, and he's helped me in a variety of different ways, including publication. What do you mean, Dr. Turbin, publication? And here's Barbara, and that's a water. But it's not always water. So Paul and I were doing a case recently, and this woman came in. I think she may have been on her fiance. I don't on her or on her, in the wedding, on the honeymoon, and she got hit in the eye as she came up. She pulled a mask off. As a diver, you never pull your mask off when you come up to the surface, and she felt something. She didn't know what it was, and her eye stopped moving, started getting infected. If you notice, there's a tiny little, this is at the time of the injury, that's all that happened. Look at that right there. That is the beak of this fish here. And how do I prove that? Well, I have my man on the island. So we took this, and it was Paul was when we were writing this up, he's like, "Oh, this is a needlefish." Like, Paul, that's not a needlefish, it's a ballyhoo. Uh, and we were going back and forth, and just a little piece of information. So after we got this is actually the surgical explanted specimen. Um, I called a vet that I had met on the island, and I called my man Bailey out on the island. I said, "What is this?" He said, "Oh man, that's a ballyhoo beak." I said, "Send me some pictures." So he sent me this fish, and this is Mr. Clinton Bailey's finger. And if you notice, so what we have, these beaks, that's not the top and the bottom. It's two pieces that come together. And notice like the little orange, it's almost like a skin on that. And notice in the live specimen. So this turned into a publication, just a little cute thing from there. And so this is the clinic where we work. Um, and we never know and here's Barbara in the background. We never know what's coming. This is a typical day. It gets very busy, and we never know who's coming. This is a typical patient. And this is what the hospital looks like in various states of disrepair. But it has a beautiful view. And we work through a number of issues out there, including um, like limited equipment, and we make do. I'll tell you a quick story about that. The stuff is beat up and rusty, but we don't have surgical infections out there. It's quite interesting. So we get in there. This stuff comes soaking wet out of the uh, sterilizer. You would never use anything wet. It gets put down on sterile stuff. It gets covered, and we use the same set of instruments, taking them out sterilely throughout throughout the morning. Now we've been able to get stuff out there earlier enough and have multiple sets so that we can have individual peel packs. And this is kind of like the disarray when we get out there, and the stuff goes out, and it just like here, it comes back as a wreck. And these are typical instruments. And so some of the other ophthalmologists donated this to me to get it out there, and we had our own anesthesia shipped out there. And I met a neurosurgeon out there who's an incredible doctor who's really running the island. And we started doing cases that have never been done before on the island. But the instrumentation is really quite limited. Normally, we would use a high power tool out there, or with a battery, and they don't have it. That's a giggly sock. That's doing a craniotomy. So we have general anesthesia, we have local. Amazingly, the kids, you can take a kid that you wouldn't be able to touch in the United States. Out there, you put them on the table, you say, hold still, and they do. This is Dan and I doing some cases. And this is a story. So I had a bad stomach, and I was in the bathroom, and someone was yelling outside the bathroom. I said, "Oh no, this is embarrassing." But it was DNA, Dr. Nilo Alvarez. He calls himself DNA, a neurosurgeon. I thought he was yelling at me for like having a bad stomach outside the open air bathroom. And he heard that there was an American surgeon that we were going to do a couple big cases. And so another team of ophthalmologists out there were happy to walk away from me doing a big orbital cranial case. And we did it together. I had been preparing. So we see the natural course and history of diseases on the island is that people have nowhere to go. So if you have a tumor or something, you're taking care of it, or it's not getting taken care of. And so there was actually a radiology tech out there who had a big tumor. I met her in 2016, prepared and did an assessment of what I could do in 2017. And I think it was 2018 that I brought up that I found some tools they had on the island. I searched all over for batteries, was able to get these old ancient batteries to bring them out. And when I got out there, despite coordinating it with the surgical directors, blah, 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 the orthopedists out there had taken the drills off the island in order to find batteries. And I'd been trying to set the surgery up for 2 or 3 years. It's just like, oh my gosh. So I went looking around in the OR, and I found another set with ancient batteries that hadn't been used in years and years and years. I now know what happens to ancient surgical batteries if you try and use them. So we had 4 batteries. 2 of them were in the green, 2 of them were in the red. And then when they're that old and you sterilize them, they go bad. So it turns out that we tested and then re-sterilized. We had about 20 or 30 seconds on the battery, and we completed. Nilo and I completed a case, and we had 20 more seconds to go on the last battery after we got done with the case. And we, of course, had the Giggly Saw as a backup. And they have these weird concepts of what's sterile and not sterile. So this one line that the ladies are putting their foot over in the cute, with those cute devious smiles. You know, if one of the nurses, or what they call sisters out there, if one of the sisters see you go over that line, you're dead. Yet I don't know what happened with this roach. She was on the other side of the line, and we have to deal with a number of different issues. There's vector-borne diseases, chikungunya, dengue, yellow fever, Zika, and other things. You have to be careful now. This stuff is becoming endemic in the Caribbean. And these are the same mosquitoes that basically carry malaria. They don't have malaria out there, but there are seasons when it's very wet, but these mosquitoes are around even when it's not wet. You just have to be careful out there. So some of these can be transmitted to kids, and obviously Zika has the implications of congenital things. So I'm just very careful when I bring younger people out there, because a man or a woman can transmit it to a spouse if they got something. In the chikungunya, you can get very sick. And so one year we went out, and the OR collapsed on us. The ceiling collapsed, and they wanted to cancel everything. I'm like, I put a year's worth of organization to it. We're not delaying this, and you can push. It's like Grenadian time, like Florida Keys time, and you can push your way through things with the appropriate influence. And so we've developed systems where now I've got logs, and I know when stuff is expiring. This is kind of funny. I think it's the only way. If you read the tray, this was given to me. It was borrowed. It was just hilarious. I think I can't tell if that's why they stopped us in customs, or why they let us through. And so we take care of little kids, and this is her little doll, and take care of a variety of things. And this brings up the idea of trauma. So trauma is provides an unmet demand to help. And because they until recently, there was one ophthalmologist serving the clinic, and he's aging. Now we have the other young lady who's there. But a lot of the open globe trauma is unrecognized. This is one of the tumor patients, the radiology tech that we did, and I have permission to show these images. The trauma is an unmet demand. Frequently, a non-ophthalmologist will be fixing this, an ENT or just in the ER department, or it just goes unfixed. Globe injuries and nexal injuries, etc. A lot of lacrimal stuff. This is an old fracture. So we do quite a variety of stuff. This is a patient with a tumor, and needs to be irradiated. There's nothing I can do. I can't take care of it. In the U.S., the standard of care in most countries would be irradiation. She can't get off the island. She doesn't have any money. So we see the natural history of things. Horrible ocular surface disease. I may have shown you this picture. Mohammed sent it to you. Get my advice from colleagues when I'm out there. A lot of really bad lacrimal stuff, ocular tumors. And so this brings us to the final part of this discussion about what we're doing out there. This is Heather Dans. She's an ocularist. She's local. We have worked with a number of them. She's particularly wonderful, and she is supporting our little new pilot program, and I wanted to thank her. And so we began in an unmet demand. This is what the end of this talk is about, to provide a program to create ocular shells for people who have a bad eye. And actually, Clinton Bailey, one of his men, when I told Clinton what we're doing, we're trying to arrange for patients to provide ocular shells. And with that, my recommendations are to have a team member on the ground who's recruiting. We wound up recruiting 2 patients, but ultimately treated 7 just by word of mouth once people knew what we were doing out there. You need to have a program of photography to standardize. And this is the hardest thing. I couldn't get the ophthalmologist to take reasonable pictures to help me. But we got some stuff that I sent to Heather, Um, they need to include the laterality, which side, the surface characteristics of the eye, the superior and inferior, how deep they are to make a shell, the eye color and contour. And from our standpoint, I couldn't do this without an excellent ocularist like Heather. Um, she created custom cups. I'll show what I mean, semi-custom shells, and then taught me how to make molds for custom shells. This would not traditionally be done by a U.S. Doctor or a European doctor, but now I know how to do it. So you need someone some hands-on experience with familiarity of the system, which I'll show you briefly. I attended like probably between 30 and 60 minutes. She came to our department. There she is. And I've got some close-ups. You need a little bit of silicone so the stuff that you're putting in the eye doesn't get stuck. There's some teaching video online, and I looked at that. And I think that was actually reasonable. It was a learning curve when I was out there, but it was a reasonable experience. So we ultimately dispensed semi-custom shells. I'll show you what I mean. We saw the patients, gave them out, had them fit. I'll explain what I mean by that. And then saw the patients 2 to 3 days later and did a teaching session so they know how to care for these shells. And then we created custom molds for the patients who I felt that would benefit most from it. And then we did a little teaching session where I gave out papers and explanations of how to deal with it. So here she is in a little video when she's teaching us what to do. That's not so important. So these would cost, each one of these, if you had this custom, if you're going to see her, it'd be between $3,500 and $5,000 in the US. Each one of these, I would point out, these are all custom. This one is this is made, it's a conformer. It's off the shelf, it's got a very limited shelf life, or how long you can keep it in the eye. It irritates you. These are all custom. Those are made to treat forever. And so she made me these 7 to just go out there based on some photographs. It's artwork. And they were really designed for 2 people in photos. And then she made different sizes for those 2 people and for me to try and guess which to fit and then to fit custom. And then, so I dispensed them the best fit. And then I was able to treat 5 other people and get them to sort of fit. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So this is a wonderful gentleman who had trauma, and these photos, if they were sent like this, would be very appropriate to help. And this is Mr. Bailey's man, this gentleman works in the morgue. He has to meet people, and take a look at him and that poor eye. Looks awful. The dead eye. We made this gentleman a very happy man. So this is a typical system. So Heather created these. These are actually handmade by Heather. And then this, it's almost like, it's a 2-part, almost like epoxy, like silicone-like system. It's not so important, the silicone, the gun, and individualized per person. I had the experience where I overfilled one of them in the first one and was able to pull it out and reuse it. A doctor would be interested in that. You all probably are not. And this is kind of the system, and this is what it would create. Then I bring this home. These are individuals. I did this for additional 4 people. Brought it home. Heather is currently working on them, and I'll bring it back and redispense now custom shells, which will replace the semi-custom shells. Some of those people will have 2. By the way, one of the patients on the island who was affluent went to Europe, the UK, and had it done for 10,000 pounds. So I've distributed 7 shells to people who have no means. And if you wanted to say the travel plus 10,000 pounds, just think about that as like in economics of and this was like a thought of mine, it's wonderful to be able to do. So this is the kind of, and we're going to be ending pretty quickly. Look at this smile. I think he was one of the word of mouth patients. And he walked in looking like that for a long period of his life and walked out. And they do recognize this. This is Mr. Legrenade. He's now running the program. This is not what you think. This is a farmer actually brought spice, and it's cinnamon and allspice and kind of good stuff. And that's not why we do it. We do it for these smiles. And look at this gentleman. So he's been that was him. Look at that eye. That's a semi-custom eye. on the left. I think it almost looks better than the other eye, and he's happy as a clam, right? And um, and so is this little guy, which is just an incredible experience. This is the best time. You know, we do this in Newark. We do it in Grenada. This is what our lives are like, and this is what makes it worthwhile. Thank you. Do you want me to answer any questions or any questions?
Can you go back to the ballyhoo and exactly what you did with that piece?
So it was implanted, as you saw in the CAT scan, in the orbit. And it's a foreign body. So one of my interests is occult foreign bodies. You can have pieces of wood. You can have all kinds of things that go into behind the eye and even lodged in the brain. The only injury that I saw from the eclipse was a little boy who fell on a pencil, and the pencil went in behind his eye into his brain. So with that patient, we took it out. It would have been, sent. We took some pictures, and we have to send it because it was explanted to pathology. I'm not sure what you're exactly asking, but we surgically removed it, treated her to make sure she didn't have an infection, looked, and they could get weird infections because that was animal material or fish material that was in her orbit for weeks before she had surgery. She didn't know she had it. She came back to us. The eye wasn't moving, worsening infection. Scanned her, saw it, and said, this is a ballyhoo beak, and operated. Yeah. Dr. Zucker.
Roger, one thing that I think is, we waste a lot. There's a lot of stuff to throw away that we don't throw away. And I'm just wondering, to speculate, am I wrong in thinking that?
You're 100% correct. And so the staff at the hospital is aware as stuff is going bad. There's really published standards on what can be used and not used. A lot of what we throw away in the United States, whether it's medicine or equipment, is good for years and years. And you can look at published standards on that. A lot of it has to be saved for a certain amount of time after its date. And the saving of that is very expensive to keep it in the appropriate situation. And so a lot of it is financial, that it's cheaper to throw it away, which is a horrible use of stuff. So we get hold of a lot of this, and the nurses actually for missions will take stuff as it's expiring or expired, and it doesn't meet the standards here, put it, and we can go through that. At the VA, forget it. I can't take that stuff. It's considered theft. And what's amazing was there were 4 beautiful slit lamps at the VA that they just need to be repaired. They're Swedish or Swiss. Hagstride is Swiss. You could drop these things out a window and you can repair them, and they're good. And so they were being decommissioned, replaced. I tried to get them. Couldn't get them. Ultimately learned that they were sold for scrap, the weight of the metal. I'm like, I'll buy them. And it turns out that Grenada, for some reason, is on a list of places that the VA will not support. Yet we were in Grenada to defend the medical school. I don't quite understand that. So what you're saying is 100% correct, and that's where we get a lot of our stuff. Oh yeah. Absolutely. And I always say if it was a Martian watching us or an alien watching us and what we throw away and what we waste and the resources that we put into it, they would decide the human race isn't worth saving,
Good morning.
Good
My
morning.
name is Ruth Molinar, and first I would like to thank you for this great job that you are doing in the islands. And my question is, how often do you go to Grenada, and do you go to other islands to do the same job that you do there?
So currently I'm going once a year. I've been out there twice a year. The finances for it dropped significantly from the SGU. There's a patient out there who needs major surgery. It would be life-saving. He's got a big cancer. I'm going to try and get out there and just do that one case and get back. But so right now, on average, once a year, I'm hoping they're going to scale back up the program so I can bring the residents in like a tropical residency medicine program. And there, I have not with the neurosurgeon. We're making plans to do some emergency cases on another island, and there is a system with a Jeff Hurwitz had been the oculoplastic guy out there before I was there, and he would go out there for months at a time and go around and do some oculoplastics on different places. So there's an opportunity for that, but it's I don't have, like, as a single provider, I don't currently have the resources. This is not Physicians Without Borders. This is kind of, you know, an individual system supported by SGU.
Piggyback on that, my name is Newark.
What kind of cases?
The central surgeries, like
Oh, all the time. So, you know, if we're doing 17 out there in a week, we're doing multiples of that here. This is, it's extremely similar. There's a little bit of difference of distribution. There's a lot of unusual viruses out there that do things. There's, but we see they have advanced disease where they can go nowhere. We have the same population, you know, here. Dr. Zarbin always talks about doing God's work here, and yeah, we see most of the same things here.
Thank you.
Can we call up? No, I don't want to screw around with the computer. I just want to get Dr. Dustjarity's talk out. So when he comes up, he can
see that.
start talking. It's not the right one. Yeah, thanks a lot. Anyway, I'd like to. Dr. Dustjarity has been a member of our full-time faculty for 11 years, and he has really extremely clinical experience managing external disease involving the conscious. He's very likely the most experienced, if not one of the most experienced, corneal surgeons managing, for example, corneal ulcers. He and I worked very closely together, doing very complex surgery where we have to do combined cornea and retina surgery. He's an excellent surgeon and a great doctor. Patients really love it. And he's going to speak to us about keeping the cornea healthy, if I understood that well. So thank you very much for coming.
Okay, and this is good morning, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this event today. And thank you, Dr. Zarbin, for the introduction. Mine not going to be as adventurous and exciting as Dr. Zarbin's. It's going to be very boring stuff, as usual. But I would like to make it a little bit more basically interesting. So I'm going to talk about the health of cornea, and then I will bring a few items that significantly affect the health of cornea, and also it's quite preventable, and that's the thing that I want to talk. There are many other things, but I focus on a few things that it's more common and also more relevant to us. So let's talk about what is the cornea. I would say the cornea is a very clear tissue in the front of the eyeball. And basically, if we look at the eyeball as two parts, the black part or the color part, I would say, and the white part. The color part is, cornea is part of the color part. But cornea actually, as a matter of fact, doesn't have any color. It's crystal clear, it's transparent tissue. The color that we see is the color of the iris, is behind the cornea. But we can consider that the cornea is the color part of the eye. And the main function of the cornea, it allows the light to pass through the eye to focus on the retina. And also, the cornea is not just a simple window. It works as a very powerful lens to focus the light in the back of the eye, in the retina, in order for us to see the objects clearly. So probably one good example, an analogy of the cornea, I consider the cornea is a windshield of the car. And for that reason, sometimes I explain to patients that I'm a window washer, window cleaner, windshield repairer, because exactly the same thing. I'm doing this kind of things. I try to keep this windshield clean, clear, without a scratch, without opacity, without any diseases, and smooth without any irregularity. The name of the cornea coming from the Latin word, basically corneus. It means horn, and the reason for that, because the cornea tissue is a sheet of very strong tissue that is very similar to horn. And actually, histologically also is very close to horn. It's close to nail, it's close to the skin, but much, much, firmer tissue like horn. And that's the reason that it's coming as a, we call it cornea, or also kerato, or you heard about keratoplasty, it means corneal transplantation. And also, just adjacent to the cornea, we have another very important tissue that we call conjunctiva. Conjunctiva is a wet membrane cover the white part of the eyeball. So again, it's a semi-transparent, very thin and wet membrane covering the white part of the cornea. And here in the right side, you see that is a little bit inflamed. The blood vessels is very visible. And the conjunctiva combined with the cornea and eyelids, it's basically make the basically a unit that we call ocular surface. And health of the ocular surface, lid, conjunctiva, cornea, is very important for us to have a basically clear as well as comfortable vision. This system not only provides us with the path of the light to see better, but also to see comfortably. The people that they have the dry eye, they know what I'm saying. When they have the eyes irritated, they can't open their eyes easily. They may see well, but they are not seeing comfortably. So that's the combination of all these things work together to see clear and comfortable. And the word conjunctiva, coming from the Latin word conjunctivus, because the conjunctiva actually is, as I mentioned, is a wet membrane, cover the white part of the eye and reflect back to the back of the eyelid. So because it joined the lid to the eyeball, so it joined two things together. So that's probably the reason that they called it conjunctiva, that coming from this Latin conjunctivus. So cornea has two unique features. It has many, many things, but this is the two main things that I want to emphasize. First of all, the cornea doesn't have any blood vessels, and that's the beauty of the cornea. If there is a blood vessels, it affects the vision, because blood vessels disturb the clarity of this tissue. And the other thing, no blood vessels make the cornea as a unique in cornea as in transplantation that I'm going to talk about it. So this is a clear cornea. There is no blood vessels in this tissue. But when we get the disease, you see those blood vessels coming to the cornea. The second unique feature of the cornea is it's rich in nerves. And that's the reason. And this is a piece of, actually, this is not a human cornea. This is a mouse cornea. This is a section of mouse cornea. And the nerves stained with, special staining that you see the nerves. And you see how many nerves in just one tiny piece of tissue. And that's the reason that, if a piece of very, very tiny eyelash, a hair, get to your eye, you feel so basically irritation and discomfort in your eyes. And that's because of basically these nerves. The cornea is among the most densely innervated tissue of the human body. It has 300 to 600 times more nerves than a skin. So, and for the same reasons, 300 to 600 times more sensitive than a skin. You may have a hair on, or even a big piece of stuff on your skin, and you may not feel it. But tiny, tiny things in your eye, you feel it, and it irritates your eye. And also, probably some of us may have experience with the toothache. This cornea has about 20 to 40 times more nerves than a tooth. So that's also is another feature of this cornea, that these nerves keep the cornea always basically unchecked. Anything gonna hurt the cornea, we're gonna get basically the stimulus. There is something is there, and you need to get rid of that to keep that very precious organ in a basically in a very healthy shape. And unfortunately, we have some diseases, and some of them are very common diseases that affect the cornea in a very bad way. And the very common things that affect our cornea is corneal infection, or sometimes we call it ulcer, because when there is an infection, we have some loss of tissue and it creates some ulceration. For different reasons, we get opacity on the cornea. The cornea may swell up and then become opaque. It's not going to stay clear. And also very common dry eye disease. I'm not going to talk about all those things, but a few things that I would bring today. This is, for example, the right one is a bad infection and unfortunately associated with a contact lens that I want to emphasize on that today. And although the right picture is not exactly from the same eye, but I brought a similar picture that shows you, even when the infection get healed, get treated, but we ended up with that bad scar, and that patient doesn't have any vision. The only thing that they can see is just a moving shadow. That's the only thing that they are able to see through that eye, and they need a corneal transplantation. But fortunately, and this is actually, the corneal blindness is a very significant global health issue. And particularly if both eyes are involved and opaque, the patient doesn't have any vision. And actually, as a matter of fact, cornea is the second cause of global blindness after cataract. Cataract is the leading cause now. Although a few, probably 50 years ago, probably cornea wasn't the leading cause because of the river blindness and trachoma. But because trachoma almost eradicated, river blindness with the help of President Carter almost eradicated. So now the number of corneal blindness decreased significantly. So, but it still is the second leading cause of the basically blindness. And it's the fourth cause of monocular one eye blindness in the United States. So we are not immune from this. We have, and lots of this, I will tell you, associated with trauma, infection. The two things that I'm going to talk about. But the good thing about this, the cornea is one of those tissue that we can replace it with a new tissue, and we call it corneal transplantation. Actually, the corneal transplantation is the most common form of organ transplantation in the body. About more than actually 50,000 corneal transplantation being done only in the United States yearly. So the numbers are quite significant. And I think this number might be a little bit old. Probably the new numbers is much more than this. And this is a way that you see, we cut the opaque cornea, we remove it, and then bring a similar piece of corresponding tissue, clear, from a donor, and stitch it together. And this is base of the cornea, a form of corneal transplantation. We have different form of corneal transplantation. And this is basically a real surgery. I can go quickly over it. So you see, we cut with a special cutter. We cut the tissue. This is you see the opacity of the cornea is not clear anymore. So we cut it with this device. Then So I think, and then this is a very specialized cutter. Then we finish our cut with scissors, remove that diseased tissue. We cut it all around. And then bring the new tissue and stitch it. Very simple. You see 1 stitch is there, 3 stitches are there, 4 stitches are there. We go up to 16 stitches or sometimes more. And you see that cloudy cornea replaced with a new tissue. And okay, and the success rate of the cornea transplant is quite good, particularly if we do it in we call low risk cornea, and low risk the cornea that is no blood vessels in it. And that's the reason that the blood vessels is one of those things that decreases our success rate. And that's the thing that also we try to treat these diseases before the blood vessels coming, because blood vessels usually coming to the cornea to help with the healing. If we treat these diseases before our body defense get to work to bring those blood vessels, probably we may end up with some scar, but that scar going to be avascular or without blood vessels scar. And it increases the success rate of the corneal transplantation. And the success rate is quite high, 90%, without systemic immune suppression. A kidney transplant is very successful transplantation, but it's not at this level. It's about 60 to 65, even with systemic immune suppression. Very, very aggressive systemic immunosuppression. So, but the cornea is we just use an eye drop. So that's the beauty of the cornea transplantation. And this is 2 examples of successful corneal transplantation. These are that you see those black things. It's just a stitch. The other one, the stitch almost gone. There are a few remaining stitches, but you see the cornea is so clear and transparent. Okay, so one of the things that make this beautiful tissue in a bad shape is one of the things that we even don't think about it. Contact lens. Contact lens is actually, according to CDC, about 45 million American, they wear contact lens. And the reason, because basically it's a great alternative to the glasses. And some people, they don't like glasses. And I don't blame them. For several reasons, they don't want to wear glasses. But The things that we need to be aware that the contact lens has much higher risk of developing eye infection in people that they wear contacts than non-wearers. Even, we are not, we are not wearing contacts, but even we may get infection. But the incidence is much, much lower than a patient that has a contact lens. And look at these numbers from CDC. Nearly 1 million people in the United States visit healthcare provider is for corneal inflammation or contact lens complication each year. And the majority of this, a good portion of this is because of the infection. Not all of them, but a good portion of this is because of the infection. American Academy of Ophthalmology says that 1/3 of the contact lens wearers report experiencing at least one red eye or painful eye while wearing the contact lens. And this may lead to infection, bad infection. I'm going to show you one picture. And again, CDC contact lens fast facts. Go there to that link. You see 45 million, they wear contacts. Serious eye infection can lead to blindness in that eye is 1 out of every 500 in each year. And if we just do a very simple calculation, about 90,000 corneal infection in the United States each year. It's quite significant. And some of them, unfortunately, ended up with complete loss of vision in that eye. Or not complete, I would say, very low vision. In spite of everything we do, we may not save that eye back to the original things. And this is the horrible stories that I heard multiple times, not once, twice. And here, because we are a referral of all those corneal ulcers, probably I see more of this than others. But still, if we look at the big picture and the numbers, they are not small numbers. And look at this very, very simple history. A 16-year-old girl on vacation wearing contact lens because she's an athlete. And then she was swimming, got irritation, removed the contact lens, wash it in the pool water, put it back in the eye, and then go and sleep with the contact lens. What's gonna happen? What do you think? What kind of infection? This is not just gonna end up with a scar, ended up with perforation, an emergency surgery, ended up with cataract, ended up with glaucoma, ended up with retinal detachment, ended up with inoculation, we call removing the eyeball. A young girl, many, many years ahead of her. And when I asked her, anybody told you that when you have contact lenses, you shouldn't go to the swimming pool? She said, no. Anybody told you do not sleep with your contact lens? She said, no. And look at this story. Go to the swimming, washing with the water. You shouldn't clean your lenses with water. Water is not, even tap water is not a sterile water. And then putting in your back into the eye and don't go to the sleep. So, and I don't know how many of you saw the box of the lenses. There is nothing on the box. It says a number, a power, a diameter, a base curve, but there is no insert in this. And there is no warning on that. Have you seen that? Yeah. Okay, very good. So for me, it's quite heartbreaking to see a young patient is losing vision because simply never informed about the potential blindness risks of the contact lens. And 45 million people wearing contacts. And each of those is at this risk. And particularly when they misbehave with these lenses like this. And you know, that's something that at some point I talked to my colleagues in the cornea. We have a group of cornea, and we discussed these things. And at some point, actually, I brought this because a couple of weeks I saw several patients, young patients, coming with these pictures, and I was so frustrated that I I never put an email to this group, but this time I wrote this is overdue for FDA to put a black box warning on the box of these contact lenses. And then somebody from the American Academy told me they're not going to do that. The industry, the you know that the behind this contact lens, because it's a very lucrative business, they're not going to do that. But FDA on any medication that has a little bit over some percentage of things, they put basically this box warning that it may cause some health issue or even life-threatening issue. Even very simple things that we use many years medicine. For example, some of the NSAID, this painkillers, that some of them cause heart issue. They put that they put that box warning that this may cause heart issue. But still, with all this infection, we don't have this box warning on the contact lens. And I think at some point, our society, and with the help of other people, at some point, I would like to see this sentence on the box of this contact lens, that everybody, when they get this lens, they see it: significant risk of corneal infection and partial or total loss of vision, with bold, large letters on the box. That's my hope for someday. So that's one of the things that I mentioned, that I'm going to tell you. Some of these things bad happens to the cornea, but they are quite preventable. And this is one of those things. If we just two simple things: never sleep with the contact lens in your eye, and never swim with your contact lens in. These two things reduces the risk of infection associated with the contact lens by 90%. Bad infections. And the other things also, you see lots of other things that they may tell you, okay, wash your hands before you're handling your lenses, blah, 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 blah. But the main two things that I wanted to tell my patients and everybody, and any optometrist, or sometimes these days you can buy these contact lenses over the internet, and some of these color contact lenses, cosmetic contact lenses, at least there should be something, these two things: never sleep with this contact lens, never swim, and never wash them with the tap water. And these simple things can save lots of vision. The second thing that I wanted to touch upon is just eye trauma that cause, again, significant damage to the eye, and particularly the cornea, and cause corneal scar. And eye injuries is a leading cause of work-related injuries in construction. And basically, eye injuries, about 20% of the injuries that reported with the construction workers. Again, it's quite high. And most of these are very, very damaging to the eye. A nail go directly to the eye. A piece of metal go directly to the eye. And even with all those things we do, that eye not going to be an eye again. You can ask Dr. Zarbin and me. Those eyes that get injury, they're not going to be an eye again. And wearing just the proper eye protection is quite preventive. American Academy of Ophthalmology says 90% of work-related eye injuries can be avoided by simple wearing eye protection. And probably 50% of the states, they don't have any rule for construction worker to have them to wear protection during the work. The other one that I want to talk is is sports-associated trauma. Is the other cause of, basically injuries associated trauma. Eye injuries account for 10 to 30% of all sports-related injuries. High-risk sports, basketball, baseball, racquetball, martial arts. And most of the time it's just a ball, particularly with baseball, or sometimes other projectiles, fall, collisions to other players. And again, you look at these numbers. This is coming from this is a slide is from American Academy. About 100,000 eye injury associated with the sports only a year. 42,000 need to go to the emergency room, and 13,000 of them go blind because of the injury to their eye. And every 13 minutes, an ER treats a sport eye injury. So it's quite high. And again, 1 in 10 players on US college basketball teams can expect to get eye injury on their court. Quite expensive, the treatment, annual treatment. 41% of eye injuries among kids aged 10 to 14 in the ER are related to sports products. And 90% of eye injuries can be prevented by shielding eyes with protective eyewear. Again, very simple. American Academy of Ophthalmology says 90% of sports-related eye injury can be avoided by wearing eye protection. And these days, yeah, that's fast-growing sport, pickleball. We don't think that this gonna injure us, but there are many reported injuries. So pickleball, and particularly, because elderly people, they are more attracted to this sports, and they, it's life. So we are, when we get age, our response and reaction is become slow. That's a natural thing. And the same thing, if the ball comes to us, our reaction is slower, and probably we may get injury much faster. And the ball moves quickly. It can travel up to 40 miles per hour during a serve. And it takes less than a half a second to travel between one paddle to the other one. Less than a half a second. How's our reaction? It's not good, even for younger players. So again, protect your eyes with polycarbonate safety goggles with front and side coverage or wraparound protective glasses. And the last thing that I want to just go over quickly, we have a bad disease that we call shingles. It's not very common, but it is common as we aged. Actually, this is a virus, the same virus that we get as a kid, chickenpox. These days, kids they don't get it because we get a vaccination. Although these days, people, they are promoting no vaccine, but this is a very quite effective vaccine to not get the chickenpox for kids. But even we get vaccinated or we get this disease naturally, this virus stays in our body, and at some age, it may reactivate it and coming back as a different disease that we call shingles. And it can affect different parts of the body. It can affect the eye, it can affect our chest, our back, our arm. And but my main things is just the eye. And it's not a simple disease. And actually one thing, recently, for some reason, we saw that the risk of getting shingles increasingly become more and more. There is one study that it shows that cases of shingles tripled from 2004 to 2016. And we don't know why, but we see more of these cases. And the number of cases per 100,000 has increased from 9.5 to 30. It's the same as study. And the complication in the eye, it causes corneal scarring, it causes glaucoma, it can cause permanent visual loss, and the bad things that, regardless if you got it in your eye or any part of your body, we call post-herpetic pain or post-herpetic neuralgia. This is a very, very bad pain. We can't control it easily. And some patients, this pain is so bad and we are so unable to control it that some of these people, they commit suicide because of this pain. So it diminishes our quality of life significantly. But the good news, we have a very, very good, effective vaccine. And then we had a previous version. We're not going to use that because this is quite much better than that. So the previous one is not available anymore. But this Shingrix or shingle vaccine is available since 2017. The efficacy is 97%. This is one of the highest vaccine, one of the vaccine with highest effect in all different vaccines that we have. This is one of them. So 97% is quite good. If we get it, and FDA and CDC recommend that we get it 50 and older, regardless. And efficacy on, if we get this vaccine after age 70 is decreased because of our immune system to 91%. And CDC recommends 2 doses of Shingrix separated by 2 to 6 months, age 50 and above. Whether or not they report a prior episode of herpes zoster shingles, whether or not they report a prior dose of Zostavax. Zostavax was prior vaccine because the effect was not as good of this one. Even those people that they got Zostavax, still we suggest to get the Shingrix. And it's not necessary to screen for evidence of prior chickenpox infection or vaccination or whatever. And because of this good effect, this is a good vaccine and go and get it. I got mine. 2 things about this vaccine. This vaccine, get it and prepare yourself that you're gonna have 1 or 2 or 3 days, stay at home, have muscle ache, fever, pain on your arm. You have to live a couple of days, particularly for the second dose. But it's quite effective. And because I see patients with shingles and I see how they go through, I got it myself. I have my wife that she's very resistant to get this. And I'm asking you, go and if you are not getting it, go and get this vaccine. It's quite safe vaccine, quite effective. The only contraindication if you have some bad allergy to this, like anything. And if you have active disease, they say do not use it. Also, it's not approved for people with, if they are basically in age of, basically they are pregnant or breastfeeding. But it's interesting, it's approved after age 50. So it's almost above that age. So, but other than that, don't listen to this anti-vax people. This is a very effective vaccine. Please listen to experts. Don't listen to TikTok, YouTuber people that they just make money out of making big noise and nothing there for them. They just make big noise to make money. They are not thinking about you or me. And just leave the good things and basically the expert opinion to expert people, not to YouTuber and TikToker. Thank you, and sorry for this. 2 injections and that's it.
I understand that. Sorry, I understand that everybody has the shingle virus in us, but it's not activated. So one of the things, I have never gotten the vaccine for one reason. A lot of people, and you just said that, don't listen to them. A lot of people say that when you get the vaccine, it will activate the shingle and then you will get it.
No.
So I
No.
know no is no because I'm listening
No,
to
no.
a
Let
doctor,
me,
but that's
we
why I'm
have-
asking.
Yeah, the previous version of this vaccine was a live virus.
Mhm.
Also, is attenuated live virus. The same virus. Actually, the previous one for shingles is the same vaccine of chickenpox that
Yeah, I
we give
know.
it to kids.
Mhm.
But they tripled the dosage because our immune system at this age the response is not as robust as kids.
Yeah.
So they use the same thing, but they triple the dosage, and it's an active virus. So for some people that they have a weak immune system, that virus may cause issue. And for that one, the previous one, that we are not using it anymore. The previous one, if somebody has an immune system, basically any disease that affects their immune system, they are on a steroid treatment. They use some anti-cancer treatment or some of these things. They shouldn't use that vaccine because yes, that can cause active disease. But this vaccine is not an live virus. This is basically it's a recombinant protein of that virus that made and then separated. There is no live virus, is it? And then they adjuvant it with some other materials that stimulate our immune system. And that's the reason we got that 2 or 3 days of pain, discomfort, fever, because that it provoke our immune system to start working. And because there is no live virus, it increases the strength of our immune system. That dormant virus is on our body, it stays on the chest.
So therefore, a person that had a history of cancer, they can get the Shingrix
Yes, they can.
vaccine with
They
no problem?
With no problem, because
Okay.
again, it's not live virus.
Thank you.
It's just a protein, pure protein.
Thank you.
And actually, your primary doctor now, when you go there, they suggest this, but I see lots of resistance to this. And I'm as an ophthalmologist, I try to, because I see the bad face of this disease. I just want to emphasize, any patient coming to me, and when we get this chance, I will tell them, go and get this vaccine.
Yeah, my GP has also recommended that I do that repeatedly. On the corneal transplantation, on the sutures, are those dissolving sutures, or do you have to come back and have them removed?
Actually, we do not use dissolvable stitches on corneal transplant, and it's intentionally, because the cornea heals very, very slowly, and we wanted those stitches to stay longer there. And we don't need to remove all of them. We remove some of them. And some of them, they become loose. Definitely, we need to remove them. Some of them, we need to remove them to make the cornea a little bit more round, and we call that the shape of the cornea become more natural to focus the light perfectly in the back of the eye. So yes, for that reason, we removed some of them, not all of them. No, that's macular disease in the back of. We have a macular corneal dystrophy. They call it macular dystrophy. That's a name, but that's different from the macular disease that is the retina disease. That Dr. Zarbin going to talk about that probably.
I have,
In reference to the dry eye, I noticed the lay people around there saying that the older you get, the more dry eye. But I see young people with dry eye.
Yes.
And that causes like a sty in the eye or something, because for me, a dry eye.
Yes, sty is a disease of the lid, basically. And people that they have some disease on their lid, they have some component of the dryness as well. And the lid disease can cause or aggravate the dry eye, and dry eye can aggravate the lid disease. So they are basically back and forth reinforce each other. So it's not very uncommon to see a patient with dry eye got the dye in their eyes.
Dr. D, again, Cash Lori. You basically touched about the contact lenses and the diseases caused by for not using properly or washing water or whatever. You did also touch the retina in there. My wife has a number of laser surgeries done for glaucoma, and she had eye detachment. And she's worried, can the detachment happen again? I don't know, maybe is that a personal question?
I have a better expert here than me. Dr. Zarbin probably can address that. I would, if you don't mind, I would refer that to Dr. Zarbin.
I can't answer the question for your wife specifically because I don't know enough about it. No, but it won't help me even to look at her actually. But what I would say in general is once you've had a detached retina, there's always a risk for a recurrent detachment. The risk is generally pretty low. And the longer you go without developing a recurrent detachment, the lower the probability is that you'll ever get a recurrent detachment. But to put a number on it generically, not for you specifically, I would say the risk is of a recurrent detachment generally is in the 5% to 10% range. But under certain circumstances, the risk could be 5 times that. So if it's a detachment associated with trauma, it's going to have a higher risk of recurrent detachment. If it's a detachment that's associated with a lot of scarring, it will have a 5 times higher risk of recurrent detachment. But if it's been a long time since you had your surgery and your retina is still attached, so years since your surgery, then the odds of recurrent detachment are probably very low. But you still, for that reason, probably still see your retina doctor periodically. And the reason, if you do, is so that they can monitor to see if you're developing any signs of recurrent detachment. I can't advise you because you should be asking the doctor that operated on you that question. Fine.
And the dry eye, they call it dry eyes maybe, or
No, they're
or the
complete.
fall? I don't know. I have 2 falls and then I have dry eyes. So I don't know what causes
Let me make a suggestion that you and I discuss this after this question and answer session. Exactly. You're welcome.
And also, Dr. Turbin, you, I will.
Ray Fonseca, Elizabeth Cubano Lions. A question for you is floaters. I know that we're talking about a corneal part, but can floaters be actually prevented in an eye, or once you get floaters, is that impossible to correct?
Actually, that's also is a floaters, again, is stuff in the gel in the back of the eye. Again, it goes to the field of Dr. Zarbin. I will leave it to him. But again, this kind of things, I think it takes quite a lot of time.
All the retina questions after I give a talk. Here's what I have in my mind. I want to ask Dr. Dusjardi a question, and then I think we have to have a bathroom break for 10 minutes, okay? And then we'll come back, and I promise you, I'll get you all out of here by 11:20, no later than that. You know, you all may not realize this, but Dr. Dusjardi was trained at unarguably the best medical university in Iran. And I'm interested to know if you see the spectrum of anterior segment disease the same in the United States or different. If it's different, how is it different? And is it changing? And the reason I'm asking that is with the waves of immigration, I'm wondering if we're actually going to see different spectrum of disease in our own clinics, basically.
You know, the time that I trained in Tehran, basically the same stuff that I'm seeing here was there. But if we go probably, you know, almost 70 years ago, there was a huge issue with the trachoma there. That there was a doctor there that he did a tremendous job and eradicated prior to many other countries. So we don't, and actually as a trainee over there, I saw some of those patients that treated initially with the trachoma with some scar, but I never saw an active trachoma disease there. The same things, sometimes here I see some patients coming from Egypt, South America, and I see some sign of old trachoma, but I'm not seeing any active trachoma. I think, the same thing. Again, over there, the same thing, because people, they wear contact lens. Although I would say the number of people, I don't have any good number, but probably my guess is the number of people wearing contact lens over there is significantly less. They push more towards refractive surgery. The culture is against glasses. Here, glasses is still more acceptable than there, particularly for women and girls. It's considered as a stigma, so they don't want to wear glasses. But they push for refractive surgery mostly. And we see a little more probably complication associated with refractive surgery. We see it here as well, because refractive surgery is very common. But other things, the diseases, corneal disease, infectious, glaucoma, the same retinal diseases. Basically, I don't see any specific things, at least in our region. But that's my impression.
Well, thank you very, very, very much. Thank you. Okay, everybody, my watch says it's 11:15. So at 11:05 sharp, we're going to start.
I'm going to set it up. Dr. Zarban. I'm going to go with.
So I'm going to start with, I guess I'm going to start with this.
Now, Knights of the Blind, the third in a series of centennial videos.
The roaring 20s in the U.S. Everything was moving. Automobiles, pictures, and hemlines. The stock market was booming. But for people who were blind, it was a time of struggle. Many viewed people who were blind as incapable of being educated, supporting themselves, or living independently. So they were kept home, closed off from the world. There were some residential schools and a few public school programs in the U.S. for blind children. Lions recognized the need to help and began their journey to become Knights of the Blind. Lions' mission to serve the blind began shortly after their founding in 1917. They created jobs making brooms and checked students' eyesight in school. In 1922, Lions in Cincinnati, Ohio, asked local schools what children who were blind needed most.
Imagine you had gone through your youth with nothing but school books to read.
For more than 40 years, Lions partnered with Clovernook Home for the Blind to produce the International Lions Juvenile Braille Monthly. It was filled with stories, games, and puzzles. Lions reported that it was the first Braille magazine for children.
All of us appreciate the magazine you send each month. It would be nice if we could talk to the Lions Club and tell them how much we like the magazine.
Lions encourage clubs around the U.S. and Canada to provide it for free. Visually impaired students from Clovernook typed, printed, and bound the pages.
We are sure that no club has ever done anything more worthwhile.
In 1925, 7,500 Lions gathered at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio for their annual convention. Helen Keller, accompanied by her teacher, Ann Sullivan, spoke to Lions.
I appeal to you, Lions. You who have your sight, your hearing. You who are strong and brave and kind. Will you not constitute yourselves Knights of the Blind in my crusade against darkness?
This became a rallying cry and energized Lions to do more on behalf of people who are blind and visually impaired. Delegates unanimously voted to make Helen and Anne honorary Lions, the first women to receive this honor. Houston Lion J.W. James, who owned a furniture business, was inspired to start employing women who were blind to make lampshades. Later, his club helped others earn a living sewing a variety of items.
Don't make the mistake by holding your blind workers down to menial tasks. Their fingers are capable of the most delicate work, which ought to command a higher price than what the blind usually do.
In California, Berkeley Lions formed the first scout troop for blind boys. With their peers, they explored the outdoors and learned citizenship. Lion George Ahern served as scoutmaster for many years.
My greatest thrill is watching these boys develop skills, broaden their interests, gain self-confidence, and thoroughly enjoy themselves.
In Illinois, Peoria Lions Club president George Bonham noticed his friend, a blind newspaper stand operator, struggle to cross the street as he held his black cane. Bonham thought that white canes with a red tip would be easier for drivers to see. His Lions Club convinced the city council to pass the first white cane law in 1930, giving blind pedestrians the right of way. By 1956, every U.S. state had white cane laws.
There is scarcely a community where the white cane of the blind is not as common as blindness itself.
Lions worked internationally for similar laws. The Boston and Manchester Lions Clubs partnered with Perkins Institute for the Blind to start Camp Allen in 1931. Named for Lion Edward Allen, the director at Perkins, it was the first camp to provide outdoor recreation for girls who were blind. It led to Lions establishing similar camps throughout the world. Through the years, Helen Keller continued to visit Lions clubs, praising them for their attitude toward the blind, which she called new to the world.
Lions are trying to help the blind as they would help one of their number who had met with a misfortune, and not as people different from everyone else.
In Michigan, the Detroit Uptown Lions launched a guide dog program in 1939 to help one of their own. When Glenn Wheeler couldn't get into a program, his fellow Lions created one with just $400 and a hat full of ideas. Known as Leader Dogs for the Blind, this program has helped thousands gain newfound freedom and independence.
With verbal commands and hand gestures, she directs Sherry to their destination.
That's still true today. Pauline Ulrich has had Leader Dogs for 52 years.
It's given me the opportunity to basically go anywhere I want to go.
Internationally, Lions have started and supported many other guide dog schools. In 1945, Lions opened the nation's second eye bank in Buffalo, New York.
A donor eye was used with a clear cornea. It was like putting a clear window where a frosted window was before. I'll never forget the very first day the doctor took the bandage off. It was the most beautiful sight there was.
Lions opened eye banks in many nations to help millions see again through corneal transplants.
You can't put a price on sight, especially to a little fella as small as he is that never has seen anything.
Across the U.S., Lions provided pocket braille writers, known as the blind man's fountain pen. Lions have also collected, recycled, and distributed millions of eyeglasses to people around the world through the Lions Eyeglass Recycling Program and Eyeglass Recycling Centers. Lions' work as Knights of the Blind and friendship with Helen Keller continue to grow. Lions awarded her the International Gold Medal in 1951. 2 years later, Helen spoke of her travels at the Lions International Convention in Chicago.
I had known that the Lions of the United States had chosen, as their basic activity, work for the blind, but I had not realized they had leaped over the wall of different languages to unite in their services to the captives of the dark.
One of her final public appearances was in 1961, when she was honored with a Lions Humanitarian Award. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Lions' work as Knights of the Blind grew.
I'm Roy Rogers, and I've been checking my notes here in preparation to tell you a story. It's about a wonderful place in America where a group is working to rehabilitate blind men and women and boys and girls to learn to live with their blindness.
In India, we have many blind people, especially amongst the poor. The real tragedy is that so much of that blindness can be prevented.
In 1990, Lions Club's International Foundation launched the Sight First program, taking Lions service to new levels. Major cataract campaigns help millions regain their sight. Sight First also helps eliminate sight-robbing diseases such as river blindness and trachoma.
The most gratifying part of it is what we do in partnership with Lions International. I have a feeling, standing here before you, of gratitude for what Lions do throughout the world.
Sight First continues to establish comprehensive eye care systems. It's also increasing low vision services and educational opportunities for those who are blind.
Why?
Though much has been accomplished, Lions remain steadfast in their commitment to serve as Knights of the Blind. They will not rest until everyone has a chance to live life to the fullest.
Someday, you will look over the fields of your endeavors. If I am still alive, I shall say, "Well done, good and faithful Knights of the Blind." And you will say with equal joy, "We have received as richly as we have given."
I am very happy that my poster has been chosen as this year's grand prize winning poster. I am a student at Haibin School of Arts and I have been interested in art my whole life. My poster shows the dove of peace opening its wings and flying towards the sky, providing all kinds of services to achieve peace. Peace represents balance and therefore represents harmony. It provides a better living environment for all people, and it allows countries to continue to develop. I hope that everyone who views my work will have a seed of peace planted in their heart and that we will create peace together. Service provided by all nations and all races is critical to creating peace. Everyone is a participant in this. Please reach out your selfless hands and let us build and create peace through service in every corner of the world. 谢谢大家。
To come in, tell them we're going to get started. They're coming. It takes time to get your way out of the bathroom. So that's, all right, I think we're going to get started. I'm going to give you a very brief update, overview of the department. Super brief, but just so you know. So, you know, who are we? You know, relatively small department. 12 at the moment, 12 full-time clinical faculty members, full or part-time. We have recruitments for 3, one of which will be completed, I hope, in August. We got poor Dr. Dusgerty doing the whole cornea service by himself. That's an important recruitment that we we really need to get done. And, it's a busy department. So it's like anything else. You got to find the right person. And if you come here, you're going to work hard and you have to like it. So we have a pediatric ophthalmology recruitment that's open also that we're trying to fill. We have 15 residents in total, 5 a year. They really get excellent training. And one year I did a calculation. About 25%, at the time I did this analysis, about 25% of the ophthalmologists in New Jersey at one point in their career have been associated with this institution. So the work that we're doing, not just taking care of patients, but training the residents, has really a profound impact on the quality of eye care that's rendered in this state. In fact, my calculation, making a number of assumptions, I estimate that during the course of a normal ophthalmic career, one of the ophthalmologists will take care of 80,000 patients. That's a lot of different people. So maintaining a high quality residency training program is not just our own personal objective. It's one of the major contributions that we're making to the state of New Jersey. We have a number of administrative staff and technical staff. One of the leaders is right there sitting next to Dr. Duschardi, Catherine Horan. I always like to say no one's irreplaceable, but I think that she might be the exception to that rule. Anyway, those people work very, very hard. You have no idea, I guarantee you, unless you work in healthcare, just how complex the simple process of registering a patient is. And people bring a lot of things to that registration desk. They bring a lot of anxiety and frustration, a lot. And so working in those positions is very challenging emotionally. And I really feel that the staff do a superb job extending themselves to help the patients. And then, of course, we have the administrative staff. But this is a very small organization. This is a table that shows the number of different types of publications that the residents produce annually. And rather than ask you to read the whole thing, I'd say just look at the first line, 1996, and look at the last line, 2023. And what you'll see immediately is that there's been a really phenomenal increase in the amount of intellectual productivity of the residents. And hopefully this is gratifying to you. Hopefully you think it's important that your doctor is a big reader and a good learner. And it is important that that's what they are. And you might think that reading the scientific literature is different from watching a Madison Avenue advertisement on TV or listening to an ad on the radio. It's not. The scientific literature is filled with false information, and you need to learn how to read it with a healthy kind of skepticism. And it takes years of doing it in order to become a good reader. And the reason that's important is what you read in the literature is what you're going to incorporate into your clinical practice. So these residents are not only contributing to the scientific literature, they're learning how to use it constructively in their practice. This is the faculty's intellectual productivity. And if you look, let me go back. The reason I think this is important is it shows that our faculty are very productive intellectually. They are contributing to knowledge. They're sharing their experience with other physicians, and they're leaders in the community of ophthalmic physicians. And this is not just a matter of ego gratification. This is our responsibility as professors in an academic medical center. Now, the thing that you don't see yet, but I'm now going to show you, is they are productive despite the fact that they are really busy. 92% of us are at or above the 50th percentile. You know, if this was a normal place, only 50% of us would be at or above the 50th percentile. In fact, 77% of us are at or above the 75th percentile of clinical productivity. So what I'm telling you is that the faculty are enormously busy. And the benefit to you and to our patients is that you can only become a master clinician by being really busy. That's the only, it's not by reading. It's, not by watching YouTube. It's by laying your hands on patients, doing complicated surgery, making complicated decisions, being wrong, figuring out that you're wrong and fixing it. So the faculty are very excellent doctors, and I'm very proud of every one of them. The catchment area, the line I want to focus on is the Essex County line. So just look at that line and think about it for a second. How many of you have ever seen an advertisement for the Department of Ophthalmology at New Jersey Medical School? Has anyone ever seen one? No, never. And yet 50% of the patients we see come from outside Essex County. And there's a reason for that, because people recognize the expertise in the department and they refer patients to the department. And let me assure you, the vast majority of those patients have very complicated problems. And when we talk about how busy the clinical faculty are, those numbers, 50th percentile, 75th percentile, those are just talking about the numbers of patients. They're not talking about the complexity of the patients. So we're not just seeing a lot of patients, we're seeing a lot of patients with really complex problems. So when I say that Dr. Dasterdi has arguably as much or more experience in managing corneal ulcers than anyone in the state of New Jersey, I'm not making that up. Or the totally weird cases that Dr. Turpin and Dr. Langer take care of. My wife's an oculoplastic surgeon. She's always trying to refer patients to Dr. Langer and Dr. Turpin. It takes months to get those patients in because these guys are really busy, and they're busy taking care of really sick patients. The clinical volume indicator is just to point out that if you look at FY13, 37,595, and FY23, 45,318, that growth happened with exactly the same number of doctors in the department. So, we are bursting at the seams. We are very likely going to have a satellite in West Orange. And the reason is we need to decompress. We can't fit all the if any of you have been here as patients, you know what the line is like at 7:30 in the morning to register. So we need to decompress the surface area, and that's the game plan for the satellite. I'll hopefully be able to tell you more about that the next time I meet you next year. And then in terms of, I don't want to be crass at all. I don't mean to by showing something with money in it, but money is a kind of an indicator of busyness, and specifically if you're talking about charges. So the growth in the charges we're a university hospital-based practice. The growth in the charges reflects growth in our clinical services. It doesn't, unfortunately, reflect growth in our revenue or in our billing practices. What is that? This means nothing to you without context. In this last slide, I want to show you the context. So you look at who in this entire biomedical research complex has the most charges. Well, remember, the dental school is a whole school, just like the medical school is a whole school. The ophthalmology department is just one department in the medical school. So the dental school has more charges than the ophthalmology department. But the ophthalmology department, which is just one department, is almost, well, it isn't as busy as the dental school, but it is the busiest outpatient department in the medical school by charges and by patient volume. So we are really, really busy, and half of the patients we see do not come from Essex County. So that to me is, I could tell you how good the department is, it wouldn't mean a thing. This is facts that I think demonstrate that the department really is very good, but we need to grow. We need to grow more doctors, and we need to grow larger surface area, and we are really working on that. So we need more space. we need more endowment. That's where the Lions have been great, really helping us. And the additional faculty members. The hospital is helping us fund getting the new faculty members. That's how much they believe in us and how much they respect how busy we are clinically. So that's the presentation I wanted to give about the department, just to keep you up to date. And I want to thank you again for supporting us, because, you know, when we bring the new faculty members on, what I want to do with the money from the chair is I want to use it to support their intellectual activity, their research programs, get equipment that they need to do the work that they need to do. You know, I want them to be successful. So that's kind of how we use it. And if they're successful, that means you're successful. That means we're taking better care of patients. If you have any questions about this, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I want to tell you a little bit about photoreceptor transplantation. No? Okay. So let me stop this. And now I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm going to go to this. And I'm going to go to, hold it. Oh, I do it this way. Is this okay? Yeah, all roads lead to Rome. Fact versus, well, they don't all lead to Rome, I guess. Hold on a second here. I thought I had it right. No, there's the first slide. I got that right. This one. Okay, so this is a pretty technical talk, and there's no way to tell you about it without getting technical. So I apologize for that, but I'm going to try to be as clear as I can. Does anyone know anyone that has retinitis pigmentosa? Anyone know anyone that has age-related macular degeneration? It's amazing. Nobody knows anyone that has age-related. Well, those are two of the leading causes of combined retinal blindness in the United States. And I'm going to tell you one strategy for how to fix it, and it's transplanting photoreceptor cells. These are my disclosures. I'm a consultant for a number of different companies. And of course, I've received grant support from the New Jersey Lions Eye Research Foundation, among other organizations. So briefly, starting at the very beginning, how do neurons talk to each other? You might think it's like taking a plug, then you plug your lamp into the electric socket and the light goes on. That's actually not how it works. And this picture tries to illustrate how the neurons actually talk. They don't actually touch each other. They come very, very close to touching each other. And these junctions where they come very close are called synapses. And you could say, well, if they don't touch, how do they communicate? And the way they do it is they release chemicals at these junctions, and the chemicals diffuse across this little gap and stimulate the neuron on the other end. And this turns out to be a brilliant way of doing it. It's a little bit, for those of you who have electrical background, the way capacitors work. And the light, you know, the light goes in your eye. See, here's the light going in the eye, through the cornea, through the lens, all the way to the back of the eye. And in the back of the eye is this tissue called the retina. It has a consistency of wet tissue paper, and it's where the cells are that capture the light energy. Now, if I was designing the retina, the cells that capture the light energy would be right at the top of the retina. And this shows how stupid I am and how brilliant God is, because that's not where the cells are. The cells that capture the light are actually at the base of the retina. So the light has to go through the retina to get to the cells that capture the light. And so the light goes through the surface of the retina all the way to the back of the retina. And these are the cells that capture the light. They're called photoreceptors. So the photoreceptors, this is very sensitive. The photoreceptors make a synapse with a cell called a bipolar cell. That's a neuron. And then that cell, that cell makes a synapse with a cell called the ganglion cell. And the ganglion cell sends a signal all the way out of your eye into your brain where eventually you perceive light. So that's kind of how the system works. So this picture down below is kind of interesting. It shows the light goes in and the communication goes out. So that's the retina, that's synapses. Now, I need to show you one other thing about the retina. You see how technical it's getting right away, which is what does it actually consist of? And this is a picture that is a cartoon, obviously, that shows you the different layers of the retina. So there's the eye, and the inside of the eye is lined by the retina. And there's a layer of cells called the retinal pigment epithelium, which are like support cells. So most people, like in a baseball game, they're looking at the batter and the pitcher. They're not looking at the catcher. But the catcher is like calling actually all the shots, right? Well, the retinal pigment epithelial cells are like that. And then there's the cell called the photoreceptors, which I mentioned to you. Those are the cells that actually capture the light energy and start that electrical signal process that eventually leads to vision. And there are two types of photoreceptors, the rods and the cones. And where they capture the light is a very specialized structure called the outer segment. You see, it looks like the teeth of a comb. Well, in diseases like geographic atrophy with macular degeneration, in diseases like retinitis pigmentosa, the cells that die are the photoreceptors. And that's the reason that people are trying to transplant photoreceptors. So, does anyone have any question about what I said so far? Or are you just afraid that I'll just go droning on if I answer it? Okay, so now the question is why do people even think they can transplant photoreceptors? Well, the eye is the perfect organ in which to do neural transplantation. First of all, we know the anatomy and the physiology of it incredibly well, probably better than any other part of the brain. Secondly, there's this potential space between the retina and the eye wall where you can stick a needle and then squirt the cells into that space. And that's what this picture on the right is showing. And there are different kinds of cells you could put in. You could put in photoreceptors, or you could put in retinal pigment epithelial cells. And the idea, it's like a Hail Mary pass. You know, you throw the football and you hope the end catches the ball. That's how these transplants were done initially. You just stick the cells in there and hope something good happens. You can imagine that really didn't work out very well. The other thing that's attractive about the eyes that space in between the retina and the eye wall is a relatively immune privileged space. Now, it's not as immune privileged as the cornea, which Dr. Dascharity was explaining. Not nearly as immune privileged, but it is relatively immune privileged, which sort of makes you hope that if you do a transplant, that the cells won't necessarily be rejected by the immune system. Okay, so that's all the background I'm going to give you. Now you're all expert on the retina, how we see, what synapses are, and why people think they can transplant photoreceptors and why we need to transplant photoreceptors. So now I'm going to tell you some fictions about photoreceptor transplantation that you may never have heard, but which I have heard. First, that photoreceptor transplants are just an idea. It's sort of like, you know, it's a great idea, but it's not real. The second is that you have to transplant photoreceptors to replace them. Maybe you don't have to transplant them at all to replace them. The third is that the photoreceptors actually have to make synapses to restore vision. I've been telling you that they communicate by synapses, but maybe they don't have to use synapses. The fourth is that you need to do terrible things like have abortions or this or that in order to generate the tissue for the transplants. It's absolutely false. You can do it in a very simple way that I'll tell you. The fifth is that the immune privilege of the subretinal space means the photoreceptors won't get rejected. That turns out to not be true. And the fifth is that just the act of transplanting the photoreceptors is not going to hurt the patient. And that turns out not to be true either. So what's the fiction about the photoreceptor transplants or idea? Well, the fact is actually photoreceptor transplants are actually in clinical trials right now. So this is a table of a variety of photoreceptor therapy trials. The ones in pink or red are clinical trials where they're actually transplanting photoreceptors to treat retinitis pigmentosa and age-related macular degeneration. The other trials, They're transplanting neural cells, but they aren't exactly photoreceptors. So this is actually already happening in human patients. The second fiction is that you have to transplant photoreceptors to replace them. Well, it turns out you can take a cell in the retina called the Mueller cell, which is not a photoreceptor, and you can turn it into a photoreceptor. And it turns out that fish, zebrafish, did anyone ever have zebrafish when they were little in their aquarium? I did. Well, if you damage their eye, they will grow their own retina. And they do it from the Mueller cell. So what is the Mueller cell? I haven't told you about that yet. This blue thing is the Mueller cell. It is a cell that doesn't capture light energy. It directly doesn't help you see at all, but what does it do? It provides nutritional support to the photoreceptors. If you killed all the Mueller cells in your retina, you would go blind eventually. Well, you know, what do you need to do? Oh, let me show you a picture. Oh, this is a drawing. I'm going to show you one picture of an actual retina. There it is. And the Mueller cell is that green cell. It goes the whole length of the retina. Now, I can't resist pointing out to you that these are the photoreceptor cells. And these are the photoreceptor cell parts that capture the light right down there. Okay, so it turns out that you can, by exposing the Mueller cell to 4 molecules, you can get them to convert to cells which behave just like photoreceptors. And those 4 molecules, and I know you're not interested in them, but I'm going to mention them. They're called TGF-beta, bone morphogenetic protein inhibitor, glycogen synthase kinase 3 inhibitor, and gamma secretase inhibitor. This is a remarkable thing, that just by injecting 4 molecules, you can make photoreceptors develop. The problem is you have to inject it like every 3 or 4 days. So that's not compatible with clinical work. But in this experiment that was done by Japanese scientists, what they found is that if you take an animal model called the RD10 mouse, then this mouse is a special mouse because it has the mutation in its retina that's identical to the mutation that some human patients have with retinitis pigmentosa. So this is a preclinical model of retinitis pigmentosa. So in this mouse that's untreated, it has no rod photoreceptors. And if you inject these mice with this chemical complex, you get that red signal. You can see it in the picture. Those are the rod photoreceptors. And you can see it more clearly in the blown up image. But what's interesting is you don't just get more rods, you also get more cones. And cones are the photoreceptors you need for high acuity vision. So reading, color vision, for example. And the reason you get more cones is, and the 40% increase in the cones, is because it turns out by rescuing the rods, by making new rod photoreceptors, those are the photoreceptors that help you see in the dark. Those rods make a cone viability factor, so they help keep the cones alive. Well, this is a beautiful picture, but do they actually see better? Well, the electrical signal, when you don't treat the mice with the chemical complex, is this, I don't know what color you want to call that. It kind of looks brown to me. It's flat. You don't get a signal because the mice are blind. When you treat them with a chemical, boom, you get the electrical signal showing that they're seeing something. And this shows that, and you can quantify that, there's a 50% increase in the signal strength. This shows that you're not just making the anatomy better, you're actually helping the mice see better. And presumably you'd make the patient see better too if you could give them these compounds. Okay, so that to me is probably the most important thing I'm going to tell you today. You don't need to transplant photoreceptors to make new photoreceptors. And I guarantee you, it may not be in my lifetime, but the way we're going to restore lost photoreceptors is that way. It's not going to be by transplanting cells. Anyway, in the meantime, we're going to try to transplant cells. So do they have to make synapses? Now, remember, synapses are those connections where one cell communicates with the other. And boy, is it hard to get neurons to do that. It's really, really hard. You'd think they'd want to do it naturally, but it's not how it works, actually. But it turns out it's not that important because there's another way that neurons can communicate with each other at least photoreceptors, and it works beautifully. It's called material transfer. And what it involves is the one neuron making a connection to the neuron next to it through a little tube. It's called a nanotube. And through this connection, the healthy neuron can deliver material to the sick neuron and keep the sick neuron alive. It's a little bit like getting a blood transfusion. That's how I sort of think about it. And there are different ways you can make these connections. One is called extracellular vesicles. That's not how the photoreceptors do it. The way they do it is with the nanotubes. And so when we transplant rod and cone photoreceptors into a blind recipient, that recipient can recover vision through the formation of nanotube connections between the transplanted cells and the patient's own retina. So here's a picture to try to help you visualize it. You take, say, a male mouse, and it's green. How you made the mouse green is a long story, but all the cells in the mouse are green. And because it's a male mouse, and there really are two sexes, male and female, despite what you read in the newspaper, the male mouse has a Y chromosome, and you can label those cells for the Y chromosome. So you take these cells and you transplant the cells into a female recipient, a non-green female recipient. And then you go look in the retina, and what do you see? Well, if you had the transplanted cells making synapses, what you'd see is that the cells that are green that have a Y chromosome would be connecting to the host retina. You hardly see any of that. What you see is a lot of green cells that only have two X chromosomes. How did that happen? How did the non-green female recipient get the green content from the transplanted photoreceptors? Well, you know the answer because I've told you. It's through these nanotubes. Now, these are healthy animals. What happens? Here's the nanotube. You see that structure, those thin structures? Those are two photoreceptors connected by that tube. And that tube is a lifeline, literally, for the sick photoreceptor cell. And they're fragile. So here's the blue arrow is pointing to a nanotube that's fractured and broken. Well, what's really important is that you can get this phenomenon to occur in a degenerating retina, and that's shown here again in a mouse model. This is a model of degeneration where the mouse doesn't have any rod photoreceptors. Now, the green cells are of two varieties. This green cell, which is shown in high magnification down here, is the transplanted cell. And I can explain to you why I know that, but that's unimportant. This cell is the recipient, the sick mouse's own photoreceptor. And if you look under high magnification, you see that little elbow? That's the nanotube that's connecting the transplanted to the host photoreceptor. And that's the transplanted cell. That's the native cell. Okay, anyway, what's cool about this is you can gin this thing up. What you do is you expose the transplanted cells to a class of molecule called Rho kinase inhibitors, and you can accelerate or increase the magnitude of the nanotubes. And the way you get this to work is you transplant a lot of photoreceptors, you have Rho kinase inhibitors present, and hopefully you have some viable photoreceptors in the host. So this is a strategy where you could probably get transplants to do something beneficial without them making synapses. Now, do you need to use embryonic or fetal tissue? The answer is no. What you can do is use human-induced pluripotent stem cells. And this is undoubtedly, from a commercial perspective, the best way of doing it. And, what does that mean exactly? What it means is you take, say, a biopsy of the skin of my finger. You take those skin cells, and nobody would object to that, I don't think. You take those skin cells and you de-differentiate them into what are called embryonic stem cells. These are cells that have the capacity to be differentiated into any cell type in your body. And by using a series of chemical treatments, you get them to differentiate into the retina, believe it or not. So here's a sequence of events where you've biopsied the skin fibroblasts, they begin to differentiate into different types of tissue, including these neuroretinal vesicles. And that, if you want to know what those look like, really, this is a picture of one of them. And if they keep growing, they'll eventually grow into a little retina. And that little retina is what your source of photoreceptors is. And that little retina makes these outer segments that have the light capturing part. It makes the molecules that are important for the sort of machinery that allows the photoreceptor to convert light energy to an electrical signal for cones and for rods. And it even has that little outer segment part, which contains the light capturing machinery. So this is a very useful source of tissue. And it doesn't involve killing anybody or anything. The transplanted photoreceptors actually can be rejected, unfortunately. And the reason is the way we make the retinas, the photoreceptors, is going to involve harvesting not just photoreceptors themselves, which are very weakly immunogenic, but other associated tissues which will stimulate an immune response. And this was proved actually by a Japanese group doing experiments using induced pluripotent stem cell-derived retinas in monkeys, where they had sometimes matched the photoreceptors to the monkeys in terms of a class of molecule called major histocompatibility antigen. So, for example, if you get a kidney transplant, you don't just get some guy off the street who was willing to give you your kidney. It has to be matched for the major immune antigens that mediate rejection. And so some of these were matched and some of them were mismatched. And what they found was really kind of frightening. These are the pictures of the retinas as you go down here. They all, I can tell you, you wouldn't be able to tell this, but they all look the same. There's nothing different about them. But what they did is they took blood samples from the animals that had received the mismatched transplants, and they exposed those blood samples to the immune cells of the, they took the tissue that had been transplanted in the animals that received the mismatched transplants, and they exposed the blood cells of those animals to that tissue. So to be concrete, suppose I get a photoreceptor from Dr. Just Charity, and I receive it as a transplant in my eye. We look at the pictures of my eye, doesn't look like anything's happening. Then we saved some of the tissue that Dr. Just Charity gave to me, and we take my blood sample and we expose my lymphocytes to his tissue. They reacted. So these curves that go up show reactions. 3 of the 4 animals showed a reaction. That means that my immune system was sensitized to his photoreceptors. That means that my immune system will, at some point, reject the transplanted photoreceptors. In contrast, the animals that had matched transplants, so this would be if I had a twin brother and he gave me the photoreceptors, there was no activation of my lymphocytes. So this shows that the immune system does recognize the photoreceptor transplants. Why is this important? Because it means if we transplant photoreceptors, we're going to have to immune suppress the patients. Now, the last thing is just making the transplant turns out to not be benign. It's easy to make a little retinal detachment to transplant the photoreceptors, but it turns out that that can actually damage the patient. So here's a picture of a connection, a normal synaptic connection between a rod and a bipolar cell. And when you detach the retina, what happens is you get a separation of the photoreceptor cell from the rod dendrite. This is where the synapse, this is the normal size of the synaptic junction. This is the breakage of that synaptic junction, and that's called synaptic disjunction. And it turns out, and this is a picture and this work, by the way, was done here. Dr. Ellen Towns-Anderson, one of the professors in the Department of Pharmacology and Physiology, and I are collaborators on this. And this came out of her work that she'd been working on for decades, which we try to apply in a clinically useful way. So there's a little bit of synaptic disjunction that occurs normally. And here, these right arrows point to basically a control animal, which shows a little bit of disjunction. This slide over on the right shows many more white arrows in an area of detached retina. So there's much more synaptic disjunction occurring. And that's a bad thing, because if the photoreceptors aren't connecting to the bipolar cells, then you can't see, literally. And I mentioned Rho kinase inhibitors. Rho kinase is a really important enzyme in our bodies. I'm not going to give you much detail about it, but let me just say that it modulates biochemical activities that are analogous to muscle contraction. And you can imagine that the separation of the pre and the postsynaptic terminals is a little bit like a muscle contracting. And so you won't be surprised to know that if you block the Rho kinase, that you can prevent the separation. And it turns out one of these, Fasudil, is already FDA approved. There's another powerful one called Y27632. So we wondered whether we could use these to block the synaptic disjunction. And so the way we did this is we have a detachment in one eye, and in the other eye we do a detachment where we include the Rho kinase inhibitor, and we look and see if we can block the disjunction. And here's what you see. In the eye that has the detachment without the Rho kinase inhibitors, you can see all the white arrows. Those are all bad things that are happening. And in the animal, in the eye that has the Rho kinase inhibitor, there are many fewer white arrows. In fact, there are 50% fewer white arrows. So we reduce the disjunction by 50%. Okay, so that's a way of telling you that there's a way to make the transplant operation safer and more effective by using the Rho kinase inhibitors. So this is the end of the talk. So the fiction number one is that the photoreceptor transplants are just, pie in the sky. No, they're really happening in clinical trials. The second is you have to transplant the photoreceptors to replace them. No, you don't. You can do transdifferentiation. The third is that the transplanted photoreceptors have to make synapses to restore vision. That's false. They just have to make connections of some sort. The nanotubes actually are easy to do. Synapses are hard to do. The fourth is that you have to use embryonic or fetal tissue. That is really wrong. You could use the skin from my finger to make the photoreceptors. The fifth is that the photoreceptors won't be rejected. That is false, given how we're going to be manufacturing them. There is going to be a requirement for some degree of immune suppression. Whether it'll be a lot or a little, I don't know. And the final thing is that the technique, the surgical technique for transplanting the photoreceptors is benign. That's a false statement, but it can be made more benign by including a class of molecules called Rho kinase inhibitors at the time of the detachment. So that's actually some work that's happening here at the medical school, some work that's happening all over the world. In Japan, I've mentioned a couple, but in the United States and also in Europe. Thank you for your attention, and you've been a very good audience. Sorry to keep you over.
You're only going to have to. This isn't anyway. Okay, very good. All right.
We did have a question.
Okay, sure.
After the last presentation, we didn't have, like, we were already moving on. Okay.
Bringing it up to be answered now, Luke.
No.
Doctor, we decided that
Hold on, Mel,
Blind
please.
Research Foundation that this year we have some extra funds, and you haven't asked for some equipment in the last 6 months. So the board decided to donate $25,000 more to the research chair to help you have more money for the work that you guys do here. That's great. We really appreciate it.
I went to the
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's perfect timing because we have all these recruitments that we're working on, and we sincerely appreciate it.
May I get a picture with the doctors?
Sure.
I also have a question for the doctor.
I'm in charge of the NZ.
My thumb hit the thing and it went off. It's like so angry.
1, 2, 1 more. Nice. Thank you.
Dr. Zarbin, I did have a question from our streaming audience. It's from a patient, I guess, of another doctor that said, I have both eyes post-cataract extracted. My lens was replaced with a premium light adjustable lens. Now I am able to read without glasses, including fine prints, which I couldn't do before. My issues were having persistent eye dryness and eye heaviness, even at wake hours. What are the pros and cons of light adjustable lens VS versus a regular lens in terms of effectiveness and longevity of the lens?
Well, I have a conflict of interest because my best friend is the person that invented the light adjustable lens, and he has a tremendous stock ownership in that company. And it's not outside my area of expertise, but Dr. Jardy knows all about it. So I'm going to ask him to answer that question. But please use the microphone.
The question was posed to him, but we just didn't get it in time.
So I didn't hear the entire question. Can you repeat the?
Absolutely.
They're asking.
I'll start at the beginning. I have both eyes post-cataract extracted. My lens was replaced with a premium light adjustable lens. Now I am able to read without glasses, including fine prints, which I couldn't do before. My issues are having persistent eye dryness and eye heaviness, even at wake hours. What are the pros and cons of light adjustable lens versus a regular lens in terms of effectiveness and longevity of the lens?
The issue with the dryness is not related to the lens implant inside the eye, regardless it's premium, light adjustable, or any other lenses. Dryness is a separate issue. But in terms of the light adjustable lenses, these are lenses that we can implant it inside the eye, and after that, we are able to go up and down on the number on the power of the lens to basically fine-tune our vision for distance or near. The other type of lens, it has a fixed number on it. So when we implant it, it's fixed. The number is there. We can't change that number. But these lenses, they give us this ability that we can go up and down on the number to basically do the fine-tune after the surgery. Because the way that we calculate the lens power, we go with some formula and some measurement that always there might be some error. And with this formula and measurement devices, still we may end up with some error. But those lenses allows us to compensate for those errors. The longevity of these lenses is, the material of these lenses are silicone lenses. The silicone lenses are not as this type, but we have many other lenses from silicone that they had very good basically experience, and like any other lenses, I don't expect any difference between the longevity of this lens versus the other lenses. We expect these lenses also last forever. But any lens, regardless of material, we may have some issue down the road that need to be replaced. rarely, not very common.
All right, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.